that I was at the Charleston Harbor. Of course, that was the first site of the Civil War to be taken, and still is a major loading area for missiles. It started with a contract going all the way back to the 50s for loading submarines with missiles. How important technology is in military technology is in terms of determining the outcome of war. Why would you have a Carter Page or a George Papadopoulos, Carter Page specifically, him being a Trident missile expert? Why would you have someone like that to be the person who would exfiltrate the Trident missile secrets to Podobny and Podobny's different seconds for General Sechin to get them the Club K? That's what we're talking about here, is these generational technologies, these new generations of technology that can obsolete old technology and allows you to sell missile technology at a premium. And that happened here. This is the place where the rifled cannon, these are smoothbore cannons here, the rifled cannon that the Union was experimenting with, 10 of them, they put over on Tybee Island, and they blew a hole in the end of brick forts as we know them. And even Robert E. Lee, the great Robert E. Lee, distantly related to Robert E. Lee, even the great Robert E. Lee didn't foresee the rifled cannons that were able to be able to breach this wall here. And then all military forts become brick forts. The point here is technology like Club K is very valuable. If I can take a technology that was developed in the submarine program, the U.S. submarine program, to be able to fire covertly a missile, basically, that's commanded from space. I can position and pre-position containers all along the ports in Libya, for instance, which I believe this is where the Club K was first used. And then I can just at 4 a.m. open the container top, again, orders coming from space, SPA war, and then fire covertly these missiles into taking over the key ports of Tripoli, Sirte, and Benghazi had already fallen by then. But you can see how important of a role Carter Page plays as a Trident scholar, then writing his research paper on Star Wars, and then the rest of his career spent in the Senate Armed Services Committee with Hillary Clinton and also with John McCain, playing this vital and critical role to exfiltrating these secrets to enemies to sell technology at a premium. We're very successful in Libya in Operation Zero Footprint with Carter Page and George Papadopoulos and all the crew. Paul Manafort selling the weapons, Mike Flynn obviously with the encrypted communications. This is the inside team now I'm talking about. The inside team that then goes on, and because they're still a network, they're an enclave, they're a network, they go straight into the Trump campaign. Joe Schmitz takes them straight into the Trump campaign. The people on the outside I'm going to talk about next, but you can see how this inside team of insiders is used to working together. They're bound together through a very large victory in Libya and also a very large failure in Syria. They're also successful in splitting Sudan. They're also somewhat successful in Yemen, somewhat successful in other countries as well. But we'll leave those Iraq before that. We can go into those at another time. But let's talk about now the people that are on the outside of the campaign, the DNC people that hack into the campaign or provide a false flag, if you will, to allow the FISAs to be generated for the campaign. We know who the two FBI agents are. The two FBI agents are Payenka and Peter Strzok. You don't see, you see Peter Strzok's name, you see his face, but you don't see Payenka. Payenka is this mystery man. We now have information with Harry the Greek, some of the great research he's done, that Payenka knew Mike Gaeta. And if he knows Mike Gaeta, he may go all the way back to this school, not just the Nabu crime unit, and Mike Payenka being the operative or the handler for the teams that are coming into the United States, the Ukrainian team. But he may go all the way back to the same school that Dimitri Alperovich went to with Mike Gaeta came along a little bit later, but they all may be graduates of the spy school in southern Bavaria called Garmisch, in Garmisch. That's where military intelligence had their language school after World War II. So we're looking at Dimitri Alperovich's ties as growing up as a young man for this kind of finishing school for spies in Garmisch. It's funded by the German Marshall Plan. That's an offshoot of the funding that's coming from the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe. So all these folks that we see now is sort of, they're pitting them against each other. They're, Carter Page is saying, the DNC said all these bad things about me. And the DNC is saying, oh, Carter Page is a spy and so forth. Actually may have all been friends and schoolmates, may be schoolmates all the way back to Garmisch. And again, we confirm this with Robin Gritz. Robin Gritz, FBI agent that was looking into this illegal trade in Iran, says they're all the kids of the elites. This was the elite spy school for training kids in all different languages. Russian spoken there, German, French, Arabic language school, and so forth. There's another Arabic language school also in Lebanon that ties a lot of the people in our story together. We had Waleed Faries, who was in the Trump campaign, a little bit lesser known, but Waleed Faries is in this school in Lebanon the same time that Manafort and Tom Barak are there. And again, Adnan Khashoggi is there. You're going to find Carter Page again. You're going to find later on, you're going to find George Papadopoulos. Again, these same footprints over and over again that we see. We see that King Abdullah in Jordan is the person who's with the Soleimani operation that was about ready to be launched, the student operation that was about ready to be launched against the United States through Canada. We see General Abdullah being the key person there. Go back to Zero Footprint and go back to Timber Sycamore. King Abdullah was the key waypoint for the Libyan weapons going to Syria. So these same operatives, this same enclave, the same green zone phones, this same private secure cloud, this same Blackberry enclave is being used over and over and over again. And these are operational teams. That's the big idea here, is these are operational teams. So we're going to go away from this historical place here between South Carolina. We talked about the Naval Warfare Center. We talked about the propulsion school up there. We talked about space war there. And it reminds us that Dimitri Alperovich's dad, Mikhail Alperovich, goes to the Defense Information Systems Agency at Fort Meade to sort of infiltrate our encryption keys and codes. Again, encryption keys and codes not just being used for email, but encryption keys and codes being used for things like missile systems, like the Russian Buk missile system that took down that MH17 plane in Ukraine in 2014, and the same plane, of course, or a similar plane with the 737-800 being taken down a couple of days ago. So there's you can hear that the folks are, I'll let this young man get to his cannon here. He wants to get to his cannon, so I'm gonna let him check the cannon out. We're going to be now moving on. We're going to move on from South Carolina and this beautiful port here. We'll get you a view of the other side of this fort. And you can see the inner workings here and so forth. And we're going to be moving toward down the coast of Georgia to a place called Kings Bay. It's going to be down here about an hour and a half. It's also another place for nuclear submarines. Again, you're going to move, a critical move here is going to happen from the Polaris missile, the initial Polaris missiles that are developed at Dahlgren Naval Space Warfare Center, where we shoot a lot of our story, to down here, and they're being loaded on submarines up here in Charleston at the Naval Weapons Depot. But now you're going to see a new class of submarine, a class called the Ohio class, where you're going to have these Trident missiles, which have a much longer range and the ability to carry multiple warheads. This MIRV capability, making them much more sort of obsoleting the old Poseidon missiles. And again, we don't guess. We go and we talk to all the people that are involved in development of these missile systems. And what's interesting about the Trident is the constant reminders that we have of the people doing the takedown on Trump. Trident Defense. A month before the staged Congressional visit by Bill Taylor, again with the Enclave Blackberry, Imran Awan's Enclave Blackberry, we also have him going there a month before, meeting with these Ukrainian officials, setting up the takedown, if you will, setting up the photo opportunity meeting for a month later to set up Trump. So again, Trident Defense, what are the 3 points of the triad? Well, we know that part of their company is in Russia, part of their company is in Alexandria, Virginia, and the other part is in Kiev at the Nabu Crime Unit. Is that the Trident? Is that the Trident submarine? Is that the Trident submarine technology? Is that the Trident submarine enclave? Again, remember the original contracts that are at play here that create this enclave, this secure enclave, are assigned to Lockheed in 1963. Since the death of Kennedy, this same secure enclave, this compartmentalized enclave, has been in existence. And when you think about it, you could have had just the people who were in the original enclave, going back to Bay of Pigs, going back to the Kennedy assassination, going back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, that same small enclave, and its children and grandchildren could be just the ones that have carried on this private covert action. It could be that small of an enclave. Of course, they bring in proxies like Imran Awan to configure their Blackberries. Of course, they would bring in proxies like O'Day, who owns Mint Press, or is the real de facto CEO of Mint Press, to go back and forth to the Quds Force in Soleimani to have a back channel, weapons channel to Iran. So sell to both sides, sell to the Sunni side, sell to the Shiite side. Is it that same enclave? Again, if we keep looking for this enclave, we're going to get to the root of this. We know we're following the Blackberries. We know we're following Bill Taylor. We know the person configuring is Imran Awan. We know it's Dimitri Alperovich with CrowdStrike and the Atlantic Council. We know the cyber weapons are coming from General James, Josh James. I'm sorry, I forget the General James's last name. James Jones. We know it's in the Nabu Crime Unit. We now know Payenka is connected to the Nabu Crime Unit with Mike Gaeta. We now know that Nellie Orr and Bruce Orr, when they go over originally to launch the dossier, they meet with Christopher Steele, they meet with Mike Gaeta, they meet in Garmisch, in the same place of this exclusive school, maybe under the cover of just watching their kids, grow up and learn different language skills. So Payenka is the new man now that there's a lot of questions about. Why are they covering him up? Why are they transposing Strzok and Payenka? It could be just to cover up this fact that they will do anything to cover up these kids of the elites that were in this school in Garmisch. Again, why are Nellie Orr and Bruce Orr and Christopher Steele and Mike Gaeta and Payenka all going to this little German town? Again, I've gone to Heidelberg. Heidelberg was the key place where military intelligence had their language school. That's where you could take money that was being put into Germany. You could take money that was being put into Germany to rebuild Germany in the American sector into Heidelberg, invest it into the military intelligence structure, and then divert money to the Swiss border. Remember, it has to be inside the German border in order to get Marshall Fund money, and they call it the German Marshall Fund. It almost is the funnel. They almost defined it for us, the German Marshall Fund. And you're going to find Dimitri Alperovich speaking at Marshall universities. You're going to find the Marshall who comes up with Mike Flynn's plan to selling 45 nuclear plants to the UAE. Really, it's going to be half of them at least go to Iran. But that guy is also named Marshall. He runs an office of net assessment, which is also the same office that pays for the assessment of Donald Trump with the document called assessment.pdf. He's the same one who pays for all the psychiatrists to evaluate Trump remotely through their remote viewing capability that they seem to have about remote diagnosis. So again, we're looking for that enclave. We're looking for the center of the network where it became rooted and then grew from. And I think we're on it. It's this inside track, this military technology. We're at a place where military technology history was made. And it reminds us of another place where military history was made, which is even Emmanuel, 100 years later. And it reminds us that the way you play this game strategically is you don't bet on all the iron. You don't bet on all the hardware, basically. You bet on the software. You bet on the software. It's not the cannon that won this battle in this fort. It's the technology of the spiral bore that created the rifling. It's not the thickness of the walls that lost Eben Emanuel. It was the fact that Hitler had trained his glider pilots for 6 years before taking over that fort. And it's not to figure out who took down Trump. You might want to go to the cover stories and fireworks displays to distract you, or you could go to the core military technology that this small group has been parlaying ever since 1963, ever since Lockheed. Remember, we're not speculating. Remember Club K. Club K is a port, a Nazi port. You know, it is where Werner von Braun ended up doing the F-1 Saturn V rocket engine. It is where the Nazi V-2 engineers did end up in paperclip. So we're not speculating here, right? That's the same port which houses our Trident nuclear submarines. That's the same port that we let Iran, through a proxy, UAE, have a 35-year contract. By the way, speaking of next generation technology, the Ohio-class subs, I think there's about 15 of those, which have this capability of sending this Trident II missile into several thousands of miles with these multiple warheads. We're moving to a new class of subs. This is even scarier because it's the Columbia class. It's the Columbia class of submarines. And where are they testing and proving out the Columbia class of submarines? Are new nuclear submarines, which aren't even out in the water yet. I think they go out in the water maybe next year, the first generation. Port of Canaveral. Port of Canaveral. Can you see why the Iran and Soleimani would want to have a foothold, would want to have a proxy there? If they had nuclear Navy ambitions, of course you would want the Port of Canaveral. It's strategic. You want the Port of Canaveral.